When I was in undergrad, I used to conduct classes for industry people. So I used to make good amount of money during weekends. So I was in REC Trichy. So Saturday and Sunday I was teaching Java when I was learning Java to people from industry. So that allowed me to buy a lot of books. If you look at my tenure, I typically stick around despite reorganizations, people leaving, and so forth. It's about putting time. Think about the tall trees had to put deep roots. So otherwise you cannot really, it takes time. You cannot compress time. So you need to put some time. So changes will happen. That is permanent. But the ability to ignore those things that happen and focus on what you want to accomplish. This is something that I learned a lot from a lot of mentors. When someone says I've worked this long, I think about the long career. But it didn't start like that. It was very clear from early days that I need to spend the time. I was very much interested in understanding the details, the technical aspects of operating system. I had the opportunity to work with developers who built the operating system. So I didn't need anything else. So I used to go be with the developers day in, day out, go in early, come late at night, debug. So I really loved it. But along the way, it was very clear that working on some very established software is also very hard. You can't make too many changes. There are limitations in what you can do. So that's when I gravitated towards new opportunities that are adjacent to what I already knew. So every time, if you see my career, I chose to pick areas where I can deliver while I could learn, including this career. It's to help Razorpay to scale while we continue to innovate. So this is something, I don't know, fintech, I'm learning, but the remaining parts is something that I can add value. So this is something that I have done it very consciously. Whenever I did a career change, I always look for something where I can add value, not just look for what I can learn. So that sort of helped me throughout the career. So the resume talks about the database and storage and so forth, but I'm sort of a person who will go do whatever is needed. So for example, in our running a large fleet, it became very clear that the operation console was not scaling. And I didn't have enough bandwidth to put people on it. It became so cumbersome that I learned the Flask, Python, Flask, JavaScript to go fix the operation console. And every so often, every 3 years or so, I have learned the web technologies, started with the ASP.NET. I know Java struts. So I've done good amount of full stack development. And my thesis in my undergrad was in HTTP and HTML. So I know enough about the front end. And I know that is the very difficult part, actually, to test and show some progress and all of that. So across board, I worked on various parts of the system, including manually doing things, because when you have to ship, you have to make hard decisions. So when I initially shipped, we didn't have proper heat management and so forth. So every day I would go to the console and then move stuff around so that the customer doesn't feel the pain. And buying machines. So whoever is doing elastic scalability, I've bought RIs, managed the pricing plans and all of that. Sometimes I've bought in the wrong availability zone and all of that, spent money. And so I've done whatever is needed for the business to run, including figuring out there are interesting cases where some data center would not have a rack. So I had to coordinate shipping a whole rack on FedEx to a different country. and chasing it through to make sure that it gets deployed. One of the distinguished engineers in Microsoft became my mentor, and he told me, when you're looking for a mentor, think about it's like a ship that is in search for direction. The beacon is not going to be in the ship. Beacon is going to be on the shore. So think of mentors who can inspire you, who may not be just sitting next to you, right? So you can find mentors who, regardless of the tenure, who are better in certain dimensions that are with you, and they are, there could be authors that have written books that could be mentors. These days, it's so much material that is available in YouTube or any other media. So I spend good amount of time. Charlie Munger, for example, I consider him to be one of my mentors. Clayton Christensen, his books have changed my view on how to think about products, how to think about how to identify disruptive ideas, for example. There are frameworks that are available. Taleb has written a bunch of books, and one of the books I really liked about is Anti-Fragility. It talks about, if you apply stress, you can gain strength, right? Like you exercise by lifting more weight. So you actually are stressing, but you get strength. But many systems, when you apply stress, it breaks, right? So how do you think about making that the systems anti-fragile? It need not be just technical systems, right? The banking systems failed in 2008, for example, right? So we do stress test to make sure it doesn't break anymore. So there are a lot of these philosophies and ideas that has shaped my thinking over time in approaching the problem and asking questions and trying to solve the problem. I see that a lot in India, where there is an urge to switch jobs before someone becomes an expert in an area. I see that across board, but lately in the last 2 years, I saw that lot more here. The key part is, I think the mentorship could be one of the things that I actually, when I interview, many times it becomes like a mentoring session because the candidates are not ready to think out of the box. And, it's okay to say that I failed. We ask questions, hey, tell me a failure, and they say, no failure, I've never had a failure, right? So, the goal is to figure out how they operate during tough circumstances and so forth, right? So I think it's about focusing on certain values, whatever those values could be. And I think it is better to be a specialist than a generalist. So it takes 1 year to understand the space, with reasonable complexity. If it is very complex, it takes longer. And it takes, at least you need to give a couple of years back to what you gained. The focus should not be always, learn and then move to the next learning area. When you're in university, we paid money to learn, but a job, we get paid, right, to deliver. So if the focus is about giving back on the opportunity that has been given, I think it would make it easier, right? And the key part I would say is think beyond your immediate team, your immediate company. Look at the greater community that is out there in every role and see what's happening, and try to get inspired by that. And if you're focused and if the component area, the area space owns you rather than you thinking of owning it, you'll get a lot of ideas. So you'll not get bored. Like I stayed for 7 years in one area, but every year things changed because I innovated. So it was not the same in your career also. You were mentioning how the trajectory happened, right? Individual developer to L2 level manager. It's total different thing. You might be in the same space, but the problem is very different. You get people challenges, technology challenges, and whatnot. But the key part is having patience. Put some time and effort to improve the talent and get more skills. You have a career, but you also have family. While you're very focused, all of us spend a lot of time at job. It is very easy to forget the family, parents, kids, and all of that. And they don't wait for your career to get to a shape to age, right? Everybody, it's biology that happens all the time. So it's important to take time off when you need it, not when you can, right? If you have a baby, you need to take a time off, not when it is 5 years old. So it's super important to have that perspective. The managers, everybody should encourage that, because what we are doing here, individually, you folks have your own career paths. But the important thing is it's a marathon. It's not like 100 meters dash, finish it and you're done, right? What do you do after that? This is what I see about the youngsters thinking about promotions all the time. How many levels can you have, right? Your career probably is 30 years or so, right? So what do you do after getting all the levels? Are you going to be saying, okay, I'm done? But if the focus is about having a goal bigger than yourself, giving back to the field, making something durable, then there is a reason to work. Like, can you leave something behind that is much better than what you found it to be, right? And if it can impact the industry. So we are in a unique place in Razorpay where we can contribute to the fintech area, and also open sourcing, a lot of these things that we can inspire other people beyond the team, and you can have goals that are much bigger than what currently your managers might be asking you to do, right? And that would be motivating. The culture is also set by the manager, immediate manager. In many aspects, your company is trusting the L1 manager to run by certain principles and values, right? So there are always micro cultures. And as the company grows bigger, it is expected that you will have some micro cultures, and there is some leeway as long as you don't deviate too much from the company's mission and so forth, right? So when you have large population, statistically speaking, these comments might come, but I didn't see it. This was 20 years ago, but I still remember it because it was I was a teaching assistant, so I was responsible for teaching discrete mathematics for undergraduate students. I had around 300 students, and I was sort of a head TA, so I had 6 TAs to manage also while I was doing my thesis, and I was doing a research assistantship while doing coursework. So the last semester was so hard that I remember sleeping close to two days without waking up, because after the coursework and everything was done, I was just out. Since then, I have not put myself through that. But handling one of the large-scale events in AWS was painful. Last year, I was on the call, handling the dashboard for my bigger organization for 16 hours straight. It was after a long time. I had to hold the fort for such a long time. So engineering is more than just coding, in my opinion. It's about thinking through the problem a lot more before trying to come up with a solution. And specifically in software engineering, I see we take a lot of liberties thinking that we can change things very quickly and ship things very quickly. And then you talk about the API monolith for years, right? So this is something that I've seen too many times, right? But other engineering professions, you see more rigor. You see civil engineering or mechanical engineering. I had one occurrence where the longest floating bridge in the world, it's in the US, which crosses the Washington lake in Seattle. It's a floating bridge, and it was constructed in 1960s, and they had to, it was small, so they had to, construct another one replacing it, which would last for another 50 years. I saw the care that the civil engineers took, right? So it's like what we do, right? You write new technology and you replace. There was no outage. It was so well thought through. There was no disruption. Of course, there were some traffic congestion when the flip over was done and whatnot. But thinking about, how to control it, the various places where we put, ability to manage replacing parts of the bridge. Software engineering, we build big pieces and not thinking about servicing it. So I get a lot of inspiration from looking at engineers, not just in software, but looking at control systems that the electrical engineers do. Like you have a main switch, you have separate switches, but in software, adding a configuration would be an afterthought. Like you ship and then you wonder how to modify it. And you would not have an ability to dynamically change the configuration, for example. You say, I need a restart. Imagine you want to put a light in this floor and you have to restart the whole thing for the building. The electrical engineer would not even think about it that way, right? But software engineer would routinely think that way. So devil is in the detail. So I expect engineers to think thoroughly, and think about servicing, not just writing code and then shipping it. Think about metrics. I admire few people. Well, there's one person who really inspired me. Is my mentor also. Is Anurag Gupta. He founded Aurora. Whenever I talk to him, it's unbelievable that the speed of thought that he has and the ability to articulate things is phenomenal. So having 1 hour conversation with him is very hard because you need to prepare. I need to prepare for 3 hours to have a 1 hour conversation. So I've seen few people like that really inspire to stretch myself and think differently and whatnot. Not any actors and sportsmen. I like them, but I don't try to emulate them. I'm interested in many hobbies outside work. I do spend. I like music. I know to play. I used to play violin for 7 years or so, and then I picked up mandolin once I went to US. Recently, I've started playing mridangam, so I'm into music. I like gardening, so anything that is artful, I'm interested in it. I used to do a lot of photography.
PS5 or Xbox?
I've tried Xbox and I liked it.
Airbnb or a 5-star hotel?
Hotels.
People or pets?
People.
Holiday read, fiction or non-fiction?
Primarily prefer non-fiction.
Time or money?
Time, because I can make money if I have enough time.
VC funded or bootstrapped?
State at which your whatever you're offering is.
Reading a book or meeting someone?
Depending on the mood.
Movie or sports?
Sports.
What sports?
Sports, I used to play basketball a lot, racquetball. Yeah, so I used to play soccer, cricket I used to play, but volleyball I played maybe 10 years ago.
Sports at home or live in audience? If you watch?
Live, I haven't done too much. It's a hassle for me to think of driving to a place, parking, and then stuff like that. So it's much easier to sit with friends and watch on TV.